What is going on, everybody? Ray Rojo from RayRojoDrums.com, back with another drum lesson. Today's lesson is all about the tune Double Entendre by the mighty Nili Brosh. In this lesson, I will be breaking down one of my favorite grooves in this song, which revolves around the polyrhythm of 3/7. For this lesson, I will assume that you are already familiar with odd time signatures and artificial groupings. Alright, Nili Brosh. She's a phenomenal guitar player whom I have had the pleasure to play for about 6 years now. Not only is she a great player, but she is also a really good friend of mine and by far the best boss that I have had in my career as a professional player. If you don't know who Nili is, I highly recommend you look her up and go check out her music. It is really fun stuff. Now, let's get to the actual lesson. Nili's second record is titled A Matter of Perception, and both Marco Miniman and Virgil Donati are heavily featured in it. The song Double Entendre has Virgil on drums, and as it is to be expected, the grooves are incredible. Today I will be breaking down my interpretation of a section of this tune for you to give you a little insight into what is going on through my brain when I have to play a song that is this rhythmically dense. First, let's listen to the section. So there's a lot going on here, but let's break it down to the basics. The first step is to understand the time signature, which is definitely a 7, but which 7? Is it 7/4? Is it 7/8? Is it 7/16? And this is, I think, open to discussion. I believe that you can think of this as a 7/8, which is what the melody is really being phrased around, at least to my ears, or you can think of it in 7/16, which is what the keyboard and the rhythm guitar are accentuating. Because I am a drummer, I often think of the snare or the backbeat to be the ruler of my time signatures, and because of the placement of the snare, which we will discuss in a lot of detail a little later, I think of this groove in 7/16. This means that we can fit 7 beats in one bar, and that it is the 16th note value that gets 1 beat. This is heavily accentuated by the keyboard and the rhythm guitar, which play a very repetitive 7-note phrase, which sounds like this. Now you can think of this rhythm as 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 3, 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 3 if you want to think of the smaller accent groups, or 1-2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if you want to think of all of the individual 16th notes off the bar, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 if you want to hold on to a little bit of a calmer pulse that sort of holds on to the 8th note pulse. Now note that on the last one we are cutting the 4 in half to make sure that we are indeed in 7. All of these are correct. There is no right or wrong here. It is only personal preference, and if you try to play this at home, try counting it out in all 3 ways so that you find out what feels most natural for you. For me, it is definitely 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, let's talk about the foundation of the individual parts of the groove. First, the hi-hat. The hi-hat follows the rhythm guitar and the keyboard accents by playing all of the 16th notes in the bar, but putting an accent on the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th 16th note of the bar. Let's hear what this sounds like at several tempos. Makes sense, right? It follows the rhythm guitar and the keyboard, and it is a pretty common and straightforward accent pattern in 7. So now let's talk about the snare. For most of this, or for the foundation of the groove I should say, the snare is on the 5th 16th note of the bar, which if you count the eighth notes and you cut short the 4, as I said is my preference, it would have the snare landing on the count of 3. Let's see what these two sound like together. Now, so far so good, right? Nothing too crazy. The real troublemaker here is going to be the bass drum. The bass drum is following the bass, which is not following the keyboard or the rhythm guitar, and is instead playing artificial groupings of 3/16 notes. This means that the bass and the bass drum are playing a repetitive 3-note pattern that somewhat disregards the time signature, or more accurately, goes over the bar. The 3-note pattern is created by not playing 1/16th note and playing the 2 consecutive 16th notes. The rest, plus the 2 bass drums, create the 3/16th note pattern that is the grouping of 3. In order to get used to this idea, let's start by practicing it against a quarter note click in 3/4 so we can hear the pattern repeat in just 1 bar. We will also be playing the quarter note on the hi-hat to make sure that we are properly following the click. Okay, so it's starting to get a little tricky, right? Even in 3/4, which is a much friendlier time signature than 7/16, it's weird to not have a bass drum on the downbeat of the beginning of a phrase, and it is worth making note of it. Now let's move this pattern to 7/16. This is going to turn the pattern into a 3-bar phrase. It is important to note that in the song the phrase is actually 8 bars, which makes it even harder to track, because you have a 3-bar phrase created by the groupings of 3 over the 8-bar phrase in 7/16. However, to get started, let's make sure that we can play this as a 3-bar phrase without losing track of where the phrase starts. So here we go, 3 bars playing the 16th note hi-hat pattern with an accent on the 1st, the 3rd, and the 5th 16th note, and the bass drum playing our groupings of 3. And now the next step would be to bring in the snare. For now, I still want us to think about this as a 3-bar phrase to make sure that we can track the phrases and put all of the parts together properly. So let's see what this sounds like when the snare comes in on the 5th 16th note of each bar. It's pretty cool, right? I remember when I first had to learn it, I was so excited to be playing for a guitar player who has tunes with these kinds of rhythmic ideas in them. It is challenging and it is really, really fun. Now the next step is to be able to keep track of it as an 8-bar phrase, because that is the way that it works in the song. And the last detail is that to restart the phrase, there is always a fill on the 8th bar. The fills are improvised, but it always needs to fit in a bar of 7/16. And it is crucial to note that after the fill, we obviously hit a crash, but we do not hit a bass drum with it. Remember that the bass drum pattern starts with a 16th note rest. Let's check it out at slower tempos and then with the music. Pretty awesome, right? Make sure that you listen to the keyboard and the rhythm guitar for the 7s and the bass for the groupings of 3. It is very helpful to track them separately since we are playing both parts. Now, as if this wasn't hard enough already, on the last time that we play this section, the hi-hat switches over to the right and the pattern changes to 8th notes that go over the bar with an accent on every other 8th note. Essentially, we put a quarter note accent over the 7/16 time signature while never losing the groups of 3 with the bass drum and the placement of the snare. This, of course, adds yet another rhythmic layer of complexity and makes it even more challenging. So, to wrap up this lesson, we are going to play the same bass drum and the same snare drum pattern in 7/16 over 8th notes with a quarter note accent on the right. For the quarter note accent pattern, I recommend that you follow the same process that we used to break down the full grooves that had 16th notes on the hi-hat. It will guarantee that you can keep track of all of the rhythmic ideas that are happening at the same time, and it will allow you to really get comfortable with it. So, thank you to Nili for having me play for you for the past 6 or so years, and for giving me the green light for this lesson video. And of course, thank you to the mighty Virgil Donati for recording the incredible drum part that is originally on the record, to which I try to do justice with every time I play this with my own interpretation. If you are interested in more lessons like these, please head to my website rayrojodrums.com, where you can find more than 100 lessons for all levels available to you from the comfort of your home, and where I upload a new lesson every single Friday. Thank you for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed the lesson, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment if there is a song or a group that you would like me to break down for you. See you next time, and let's go practice.